Okay, so here we are. We're live with the October House Experience Graphic Novel of the Month Club, and the book that we're celebrating this month is Two Brothers by Gabriel and Fabio Moon, which is a great book, right? Everybody loved the book, yeah? There we go. Make some noise. And we have both of them here live via video, which Doug will switch to them and show them on the screen in a second here.
Shit.
Little technical problems here while we're getting it worked out, but okay.
There's Gabriel.
Hello, Gabriel.
Fabio.
Hello, Fabio. How are you guys today?
We're good.
Good.
Very good.
So what time is it in Brazil right now?
It's 3 p.m.
Yeah.
3 p.m.
3 p.m. Okay, middle of the afternoon. Okay, well,
Yeah.
thank you very much for taking the middle of your day to come and spend some time with us. Now, did you guys do you have anything that you wanted to show us? Are you going to do you had a little presentation, I thought, or not?
Well, we have a little presentation about some of the making of the book. If you want to see that first, or if you want to see that later, you can choose.
Start with that, and then we'll go to questions and answers, if that's okay.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
So let's see this.
Screen. There you go.
Okay, so you can see this?
Yep, we can see it.
All right. So, well, first, I'm gonna talk about how we did the script of the graphic novel. You all know it's an adaptation of a novel, right?
Yes.
Okay. So we did several
Readings. Several readings.
Yeah, several readings to better understand the book, and made several summaries, and we did this little. Can you see the arrow here?
Yep.
Yes. Okay. So we did these little cards with short moments of the story for the whole story, and afterwards we did the layouts. The way we wrote this book, we did directly layouting all the pages with the texts and the images, because for us it wouldn't make sense to write a regular script explaining, describing everything we would draw and everything that we would have people saying, and this way we did seemed more organic, but it also takes a lot of time because you already have to make all the decisions at this stage. So we had to decide what was the text that was going on and the images. So, and this process took a little over 2.5 years only on the script. So these are all the stages. This is the novel, the original novel. These are the cards with all the story separated in little moments. This is all the layouts, and this is a notebook with the summaries. We have a timeline of the whole story. We had a list of characters that appear, list of places that appear on the story, animals and plants that appear in the story because it's set in Manaus, in the heart of the Amazon. So there's a lot of animals and plants that are not very common here in São Paulo. So we made sure we had a list of everything that appeared in the book. So if they appear in our graphic novel, we would know what to look for. Then it's a little bit of our research of the city. This is the square in front of the school, the Vandal's cockpit, where both Omar and the narrator go to school. And this is from the 1940s, I think, this picture. So we did a lot of research online with old pictures, but we also traveled to Manaus when we started working on this book to get to know the city and get to know the universe of the story, get the dimensions of where the story took place. So here you see the school that was based on, some pictures of the port, the river, and the boats, and how they turned out in the story. Here's an old picture from the 60s, early 60s, of the floating city that was this neighborhood of houses on the river, and how a few years later, in the mid-60s, it was all gone. And that's one of the things that is portrayed on the story. Here, some pictures how it showed up in the story, the port and the floating city. Here it's us in the square in front of the school. Here are two pictures we took on our trip. Here we have two pictures we got from the internet on our research, and later on the book we needed more angles, new angles to build a scene, to keep telling the story, but we couldn't go back to Manaus. It's too far. It's 5 hours. It's a 5-6 hour flight from São Paulo, so it's very far. And so we got new images from Google Street View. By the time we first went to Manaus in 2011, they didn't have Google Street View in Manaus, but in 2013 and 14, they already have it. So we could go back to the streets and to the square and get new angles of the places we've been and we needed for the story. This is an overview of all the places we've been throughout during our trip to Manaus. This is the downtown area of Manaus. Here we have some of the early sketches of the characters, just getting to imagine this type of characters of Lebanese immigrants living in Brazil. Then trying to shape, we began trying to design Halim first, the father, because I think he's the character that we like the most. So we wanted to start with him. Some different ideas, getting the style, some expressions. Here are some early sketches trying to figure out how the mother would look like, how Zana would look like. Very different from what ended up in the book. Our initial ideas for Zana, she would be much more sensual and exotic, kind of gypsy woman. And then we have a story about that. You may have read already. Here's some more sketches of the characters, getting the proportions and one in relation to the other. Some initial sketches for the twins, trying to get their face right. Initial sketches for Hania, the sister, and then the brothers as kids and grown-ups. These sketches we did already throughout the book to get how the characters would grow older. Here's the narrator. Here's Halim and Hania and Zana. Here's the first full design of all the characters from the family. Zana looked very, very different from what she ended up in the book. And here we did a scene of the whole family in the store, just to get a sense of location and something that that has life in it, not only a design of a character design that has no life in it. So we wanted attitude, we wanted character in this story, in this drawing. Then how the characters ended up being in the book, and I think you know all this image that ended up in the book plate. And this is it. This is the presentation I had. How do I turn on this? You. How do I start here? Okay.
Yep, that's you. So I think one of my first questions might be, what's your guys' process for working together? You know, I mean, generally comics are inked by one person or penciled by one person, inked by another person. But I feel like you guys work a little more organically. Is that correct?
Well, I think the part of the process that we work more closely is always on the script. That's the part where we can really say that we both put our hands strongly together, is when we're thinking about the story, or when we're breaking scenes down, or when we're deciding where to finish a chapter, where to begin the next chapter. The script is the part where we can really work together. Behind my brother is our working station. It's 2 sets of drawing tables. So we spend all day looking to each other. So our script process is basically talking to each other out loud and deciding what we're going to do and what the story is going to be. And we do that out loud. And afterwards, one of us has to type it down. But that's the part where we can really work together and make it look like, doesn't look like, this is my part, this is his part, and my brother is trying to move the camera so he can see the tables. But after we write the script, in our ideal world, we have to choose one of us to draw. Most of the times, we divide the drawings. I'm going to draw this book. My brother is going to draw that book. Because our styles, they have similarities, but at the same time, they are very different. And we think that if we change the art style throughout the story, it might distract the reader. So we choose the style that fits that story best. And since I had done the artwork for Day Tripper, we knew that the next book was going to be my brother on art duty. So on Two Brothers, my brother did the entire book, the entire artwork.
Okay. I had not noticed that. That's cool. Were you in contact with the original author of the book at all, or did you just do this completely without showing it to him while you were working on it, or anything like that?
Well, he didn't want to control the process, or he let everything in our hands, trusted our work, and we also didn't want to reach out for him all the time just because he's there to get to know, oh, what do you mean, what you meant here, or what did you want to say here. We wanted to trust our reading of the story. And so we only contacted him 2 times. One very early on, before we went to visit Manaus, the city. We talked to him, and he gave us tips of places to visit that appear in the story, where they are in the city, which places are still there, which places are not, places that have changed names like squares. He put us in touch with friends that live in the city to help us walk around and see, take the best advantage of our visit. And then 2 years later, when we did this first initial sketches of the characters that I showed you, we we showed him because we wanted to see if he liked the characters, if they were something like he imagined, and he liked all of them except from Zana, the mother, because he had a completely different idea for her, and he showed us some family pictures, old photographs of his mother and his grandmother and women from Manaus in the 20s and 30s and 40s. And he told us, we talk about what this character would mean in the story, for the other characters, for the reader, what Zana would mean. So that helped us a lot to understand the character better. So we redesigned her based on this conversation. And the funny thing is that the pictures he showed us, they matched the research we were doing. So we were researching not only the city in the early 19th century, but the people who lived there. And the women looked like the pictures he showed us. But we were ignoring that image to create a character we had in our minds. And after we talked with him, we realized, no, the women were like that, and this is the kind of beauty and elegance and charm that we should shoot for. And that helped us understand the character and go for that look. And we wouldn't have done that if we hadn't talked to him. But those were the only moments that we really talked with him. We ran into him in other festivals here in Brazil, but we would talk about, the weather or something, because we don't really want to show. We had nothing to show at that time. Like working 2 years on the script, those layouts, they're nothing compared to the final thing. So we can't explain or show how the work is doing, how we believe it will be by those layouts. So only when we started having final chapters, we started sending him, and then at the end of the book. So he saw very few things when they were ready, and after the book was ready, we sent him the whole story. And that's it.
What was his reaction to the final product?
Oh, he loves it. He was very surprised because he talks about the city in a way that it doesn't exist anymore. The city is still there, but the city that he lived in and he remembers has changed so much and has been ruined and destroyed. And he talks about this city in the book, and seeing that in images and how it changes throughout the time was very impressive for him. And also the power of the images to tell the story, to transmit emotions, and all the silent scenes, silent moments that we've put in the story as well. How we could tell so much with silent panels, and he was very impressed with that. So we couldn't be happier because he really likes the book, and well, we've been doing a lot of panels and discussions with him in schools and festivals, and he's our best advocate. He always says the best things about our story. He says best things than even we do. We don't say good things about our story as much as he does. His compliments are the best. So we're very happy that he liked it.
That's excellent. The novels have different structures and different rhythms than comics. Was it a challenge for you? I mean, you said you spent 2 years on the script, so clearly you put a lot of thought and time and energy into it. But was it more challenging for you to take a structure that's not necessarily conducive to comics and the rhythms of comics than it would be for something that you would do native to comics. Does that question make sense?
Yeah. I think
it was definitely more difficult. We almost didn't take the job because I had read the book when it first came out around 2000. So I knew when they came to us asking if we wanted to adapt this book, I knew it would be huge amount of work to turn into a good graphic novel, to make sure that all that different structure of the narrative could work. We had to break it down a lot to make it work, to make that flux of consciousness type of narrative work with all the back and forth, and try to figure out how to make that work visually. That was the biggest challenge, and we almost didn't take the job because we knew it would be a lot of work, and we figured out we would spend 2 years total doing the book, and we ended up spending 4 years doing the book. But we knew it was going to be it was going to be trouble, but that was actually the challenge that drove us to do it, because it's very different. It's a very different type of narrative that we don't see often in comics. So maybe if we did pull it off, then it would be a very good comic and we would be very proud, and then it would be the type of challenge worth spending 4 years. And so we ended up choosing the project because it was hard, because it would make our lives miserable for a long time, and because it was such a different type of story, a big tragedy that I think the reader could spend years of the characters' lives to see all those characters grow and have stuff that they disagree on, and they fight and they try to make up and it doesn't work and everything crumbles down. To be able to have a story that big that goes all those different emotional places, and that was the challenge that we thought we didn't see enough in comics, and we could try to do and to see if we could make it work.
One of the things I particularly liked about the book was, how it moves around in time, and because you don't get a lot of moving around in time necessarily in comics. Were there things as you adapted the novel, were there things that, like lessons that you learned about how to make comics better? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, in the actual novel, this moving in time thing could happen like 3 or 4 times in the same paragraph. And that's one of the characteristics of Milton's style of writing, and one of the most difficult parts of adapting it into the graphic novel. So we try to keep that as much as possible, but keeping bigger chunks of the same periods, the same time at once, so it wouldn't be so cut out, so little bit of pieces here and there all the time. I don't want to say we made it easier, but it's a little easier, because the way you can do it in prose, it works and demands the reader to make that effort to, as he's reading, he goes back in time, and then he's talking about the present, and then he's remembering again, and then he's remembering something that someone told him, and then he comes back to the present, all in the same paragraph, sometimes in the same sentence. So we try to do that as much as possible in comics with narrations and dialogues and images and saying about one thing and showing another, but it's not as complex, because when you're writing and you have a narrator, you're thinking about stuff, and your thoughts, they flow and they go places, and we wanted to be a little more grounded on the story. So we had to choose what to show, what not to show, what to tell. So is this happening in the scene? Is the narrator here? Is one of the characters here? How are we going to show this? So these were the choices we had to make throughout the whole story to decide these scenes go in, this scene doesn't go in. We're showing this by the point of view of the narrator, so he's in the scene, and we're showing this by the point of view of one of the members of the family who's telling that to the narrator, so he is in the scene. And so we had to make all these choices, but making the big, huge efforts to try to keep the style of the writing on the book, and this back and forth that we liked. We like non-linear narratives that put little bit of pieces together as you read the book, and you only get the full picture in the end. So we had that.
I think we learned a lot about this complex structure of narrating a story while we were working on Casanova, for example. Casanova is a very complex book, and I think working on Casanova made us think a lot about how to make sense visually of scenes that play out in very short periods of time. From one panel to the next panel in Casanova, things can change drastically. And to make sure that the reader understands all those changes, all those jumps from one scene to the other, from one panel to the other, from one page to the other, I think Casanova still is a very good homework exercise to try to figure out how to draw complex narrative. And I think we use a lot of that, trying to make sure that Two Brothers works visually, because that's the biggest change that we have to learn and to make sure that it works. It's the flow of consciousness has to work visually. People have to be able to follow the visuals, so that the words, they are another layer, but the main layer is the visual. The visual drives the reader from one scene to the other, from one character to the other, and so we had to work and figure out how to make sure the starting point of the scene to be understood was a visual starting point.
I very much agree. Yeah, you guys have always impressed me as long as I've been reading your comics, that you're really interested in trying to figure out how the page ticks, about how panels relate to one another, how scenes build to one another. There's a language to comics which is very different than any other art form, and I certainly appreciate the efforts that you guys do try to learn these things and figure these things out.
Thanks. I don't know. Was there a question?
No, that's a question. I'm sorry. So we have some people on the internet as well. So if you guys want to ask questions, I see a question, Doug. I see it. I was getting to that. So if anybody who is watching on the internet, do feel free to jump in. Corky Labelli, I think that's how you pronounce it. So the question he wrote is do you plot the whole story first, or does it evolve over time? Which I think you talked about a little bit, but maybe you can talk about some of the ways that you when you first read the book, you think you're going to adapt it in a certain way, and the kinds of changes that have to be made as once you get into it.
Okay. Well, the way we saw the story and the whole book before we started working on it was different, for sure. We didn't understand the story as well. We only seen that from afar and as this huge work that we're going to do. We had these concerns about the narrative structure of the story. How could we tell that as a comic book? We thought we would take 2 years working on it, and it took us 4. We also thought it would be much longer. It would be like 400 pages or something. And it was actually shorter than we first expected. So throughout the whole process of making the script, making that layout script, we read the book several times, and every new reading, we started understanding the story a little better and understanding the meaning of each chapter and what happens to the characters and what their intentions were. Throughout the whole story, we changed our opinion on who was the good brother or bad brother, or who is the narrator's father, for example, because we started seeing the story differently. We had one opinion by reading the book once, but after reading and rereading and getting into the story, we had a completely different opinion, which helped telling the story, to let this doubt there to the reader as well. And I don't know, we thought we would cut out a lot more from the original story, but we ended up being what we believe very faithful to the story. Almost every important moment of the story is there in the graphic novel. So when people say, when people say that once you start writing your story, the characters write themselves and all that crap, it happens. It happens because once you start writing the story, there are some ideas, some things that you thought initially, they don't fit anymore with what's done. You have initial ideas in the beginning of the project, but now you're halfway through the book. The characters are alive. They look in a certain way. They have done certain things which will help them do the next things. So every new page helps the next one, and we keep looking back for the beginning of the book to understand how it will continue to tell the story, and try to look to the end and see what has changed from our initial view. So I think that's the biggest advantage of working on a same project for so long. So when you spend 4 years in a story, you have the time to understand it better, to make the best decisions, to learn from what you already done, to finish the story the best way possible. And one of the things that we decided to do was to write and to draw the introduction of the story, the first 7 pages, in the end of everything. So after I drew the whole book, I went back to draw the first 7 pages. First of all, because only in the middle of the process of doing this book, we realized this scene takes place in the 60s or in the early 70s. But it's in the beginning of the book. So the first image I had was that it takes place in the 40s, when the story begins, when Yaqub returns from Lebanon. So after rereading it, I realized, no, this takes place in the future when Zana is leaving the house, and it's in the 70s. So the characters would look differently, the house looks differently, the city looks differently. And that helped us build this sequence a little better. And we only realized it in the middle of the process. And we left it to draw in the end of everything, because at this time we already know all the characters, we would know the house, we would know everything, and we could portray that with this knowledge that help us to make the best introduction for this story. Because this introduction sets this question for the whole book about the brothers making peace, that will keep the readers for the whole book. So that's why we left it to the end to do it. And so yeah, the process of working always helps along the way. It's not, we try to think about all the stories, the whole story before we start to draw, but that didn't happen in this book as well. We started drawing it in the middle of the process. But we already had the novel, so we knew what the story would be. Not our story, but the whole story. So that helped a little bit, I think.
I'm actually going to go to one more question from the internet here. This is from April Kent, and I'll paraphrase a little bit. She asks, was there anything you cut from the novel that you think, don't move it on, I'm trying to read it, that you think maybe should have been included in your final adaptation? To which I would really think that was more like you get towards the end of it and you're like, oh wait, there's this scene that we should have not cut. Was there anything that you resented cutting, or even things that you thought were nice and beautiful, even if they didn't fit the structure of the book, that you're sad that ended up not working in the graphic novel?
Well, there's one of our favorite scenes in the novel, is not in the comic book, which is the fight that Halim has in a public square with some guy who's telling that Halim is having affairs with Indian women from the neighborhood. So he goes to this public square and he fights with this guy, and that's a very strong scene in the book, but it didn't really move forward for the story that we're taking. It focused too much on Halim, and for us, Halim was already the main character, like the main, more important, more awesome character, and we were trying to make sure the story didn't become the story of Halim and the other people. So we had to focus more on how Halim interacted with everybody else, and if that was the story, only that he was the only part of the story of the main characters. It was the only part that we could take off to focus on the main family and all that drama. So we ended up taking that out, and we took some other parts out, but that's the one that it's one of our favorite scenes in the book, but at the same time it didn't work for our story. It didn't work to make the other characters more interesting. And yeah, I don't know why my brother is showing drawings.
Yeah, because you may see him here in our character sketches. We drew here Halim holding a chain here, and this is from the fight scene in the public square. So this is one of the things that initially we wanted to get in because it's a scene that we really like, but in the end it didn't fit how we were telling the story, so we didn't let it in. But we had designed, we wanted to tell this this scene, because also
it's a fight scene.
Yeah, it's fights. Fights are fun to draw. They're action. You know, even if we like to tell stories that are human relationships and psychological inside their heads of the characters and everything, we like action. We like to draw action scenes. They're fun. But even so, we decided not to include this scene in the book.
Interesting. So I thought maybe we should open it to some questions here in the room. You seem like you already had your hand up, so speak up a little bit so make sure they can hear you.
Sure. That was so I was curious what it was like working together on this story. Obviously, there's parallels to your life. I mean, you are twin brothers, and you're writing this like very emotional, raw story about the family dynamic that centers around two twin brothers. So I was curious what that was like working on this story for 4 years and how that felt or maybe didn't feel personal to you two and how you were together in your life.
Did you guys hear that?
Yes. I was waiting to see if Fabio wanted to answer.
Yeah, too personal of a question, but whatever you want to say on that, I'd be very interested.
Well, obviously we are not those type of twins. We are not the twins that hate each other like the ones in the book. But I think we understood very well the universe of the twins and how every other person relates to twins around them. So it's like when this talk was beginning and somebody there in the store said, they don't live in the same place. They're not together.
All the time.
Yeah, people expect twins to be together, expect twins to get along. They expect twins to have the same opinion, to look alike, to feel the same things. So we understand that very well. We see that every day, and we knew that is the main difference between regular brothers and twin brothers, is that perception that everybody expects them to be the same person and have everything in their lives be the same. And that's the main reason that drama in the beginning, that question if the twins are going to make peace in the beginning of the story, it's a question that makes the reader interested throughout the whole story. Because they're not only brothers, they are twin brothers. It doesn't make sense that they hate each other. It doesn't make sense that they didn't get along. And we knew that would keep the reader interested. That keeps everybody around twins wanting them to get along all the time. And so we thought we could portray that emotional density of the story well. But working on that book for 4 years, we almost turned into those two twins, and I almost began to hate my brother, and he almost began to hate me because it took so long.
Yeah, I was the one working. He was on the hammock, kicking back.
That's great. Sienna?
Yeah, so actually, who is the narrator's father? It's like throughout the book, it's like keeps flip-flopping between the twins, but then at the very end, the narrator makes this comment that almost makes it seem like Khalid's the father. Like, was that just thrown in there to just confuse the reader and keep you wondering if who's the father? You actually know.
Okay. We heard the very beginning of the question and not all your comments about it. So
yeah, there was a
All right.
but I think what you want to know is if we know who is the father of the narrator.
Yeah, like is it one of the twins or is it Comix?
So she's asking if it's one of the twins or if it's Helene, because there's a sequence at the end of the book that would seem to suggest that it's Helene.
Mm.
I think all three possibilities are possible, and I think there isn't a straight answer to that question in the book. There you can't put all the pieces together in the book and see, of course it's Omar, or here it says that it's Yakub, or that's why Halim liked the boy so much. There are clues throughout the story, but there is nothing that makes people be sure who's the father. And I think that was in the novel, and it's one of the charms of the novel, and that's one of the things that we actually realized reading the novel several times. The first time we thought, the first time I read, I thought Yakub was the father. But then afterwards, after I read it again 10 years later to do this book, I was reading with my brother, and my brother said, no, didn't you see that time when Dominguez is telling Nael that Omar also raped her, so he's the father. I said, but then that doesn't prove anything. That just tells people that Omar also had sex with Dominguez. So we realized we would never know for sure. And I don't think even Newton wants to know anymore. I think he said when he was writing the novel, he was thinking about when he was finishing the novel, he was thinking about how to write who the father was, and he realized he didn't want to make it obvious and to make it clear, because that would make the story weaker, so people didn't have to think and reflect for themselves. And so we try to make it as interesting and as dubious and as obscure as the novel. So people have to, if we did our jobs right, they do finish the book without really knowing and angry with us. That's, who is the father?
Very good. Any other questions from the audience? Emma, come on, you love the book. You have something to say.
Well, I guess it's more like an artistic process. Like, always, that I can't escape that whenever I'm reading these comics. Like, how did they do this? Like, what part did you love most about drawing it, and what part did you dread most?
What part did we love most?
And what part did you dread the most about drawing?
Have to think.
Because I hate drawing like architecture. Because of the like this, like, even without the color, you could see, you could feel there in like forests, and feel the color, even though it wasn't there. And so, yeah, just through the ink process, like, amazing you could do that. Just take you fully into the story. But like, did you hate drawing any kind of part of it? That didn't show. I was just wondering behind the scenes there.
Okay, we are lost here. We're not listening. Yeah.
So
we love questions from women. We really do love questions from women. We love female readers, but we are not listening to what the questions are.
Yeah. So the question was what did you like drawing? What did you dislike drawing? Emma's comment was very much that even though the book was in black and white, she could still feel the color of the Amazon, and she was very very much like that. She draws herself, and she for herself hates drawing buildings. So For you, how does, for your process, what did you like, what did you not like?
Okay, so I'll invert the questions. I'll start by saying I love architecture. I love buildings. And I love how you can tell the story of a place by the buildings, the period that the architecture remounts to. And so it was one of the most important parts of this work, was trying to help the story by choosing the right sets, the right angles, portraying the city in the right period and how it changed throughout the years. And that was one of the challenges and one of the most joyful things, I think, of this book, but also very hard. But it's something that I like to do. About the colors, we very early on we thought about doing it in two colors, maybe, like having one key color for one brother and one other color for the other, so we could try to separate visually as well the universes of each brother. But we gave that up because that would be consuming and distractive, wouldn't help the story, uh, and we decided to do it in black and white because we love black and white art. We think that it has a very strong poetic charge into it. How you have to interpret, how as an artist you have to watch the world and interpret it only in black and white, make decisions, and sometimes abstract, and how we can play with open spaces going into the white of the page, or black spaces and everything melting together into the shadows. And also for the reader, I think it demands a lot from the reader. The reader has to dive into the story, has to translate that black and white art into his head and understand that it's a world, it's characters, they're doing stuff, they're in this place, and it's a bigger effort than it is on colorful books. So it ends up being a more personal, more intense reading experience, and we thought it would fit better for this story. And I don't know, there's a lot of important moments of the story that I was looking forward to get to and drawing. So, like, the first scene of the first chapter is when Jakub returns to Rio, and the ship is in the docks. It's a big scene with all those people on the ship waving for the people on the docks. That was the first scene I drew, and I wanted it to be very epic. And then there is the scene where Omar cuts Jakub's face in the little attic in the house. I wanted to be very dramatic and full of mood in the dark, and I was very much looking forward to drawing that scene, even though it's all kids and it could look like it's a cartoony style. It's a very tense and obscure scene of these characters, and I am very pleased how it played out. And there's a lot of scenes. The biggest scenes, if you look throughout the book and you see the big scenes that look very epic with big landscapes, or a building, or close-ups in with the characters, like the moment when Nael and Hanya go for it in the attic of the store, for example. It's one of the most anticipated scenes for us. Like we spent 3 years and a half waiting to draw that scene. And also the ending. I think the ending is one of the scenes that we had to make it work. When Omar gets into the yard through the fence, just looks at Nael, and Nael is expecting him to ask for forgiveness, and he doesn't say anything and just steps back into the shadows, and it's raining. It's already on the novel. It was already very visual, and has very few words, and we had to make it work. So we were glad that it was in the end of the book, so we could build up to draw that scene. We could never draw that scene in the first place, like begin with that scene. We had to understand the whole story to get to that. So, all these scenes were very, like, apotheotic moments for me to draw, but also dreadful, because if I didn't do it right, I could ruin the book. It's one of the best things of working together is that when you are a cartoonist that works alone, you have to make all the decisions. You know when this is not your best work, but not everyone has the energy or the dedication to erase everything and do it again until it's the best thing that you can do. And we keep telling each other that all the time. So we keep reminding ourselves, oh, you could do this better. Oh, you were lazy here. Look at this anatomy. It doesn't fit. This angle is wrong. So we are always picking on each other and pushing ourselves to do the best we can. So it's very easy to have an image in your head, and when you put it on paper, it doesn't look like what you've seen, what you've imagined, and we just erase that and do it until it is what we have pictured. And we like this story so much that it deserved that. So all the big moments in the book that I was very much looking forward to draw, I was also very scared of making them shitty, but I don't know. Again, one of the good parts of working on a book for 4 years. What's 1 extra hour, 2 extra hours are going to make a difference. So erase everything and do it again. It will look better in the second time, in the third time, in the fourth time. It will keep looking better. Every time you remake it, redo it.
So do you guys ever have a situation where you're working, where you're drawing the book, Gabriel, but then Fabio, you're like, no, this needs to be a worm's eye view or a bird's eye view or whatever, and then you go in and you draw and you show them how you think it should work? Does that happen, or is it just...
Not really on the page, but on supporting paper next to it. Sometimes we sketch things on another paper just to make the communication faster. Just to show the contrast, show the planes and the background, foreground dynamics. Sometimes we do little doodles, but the page is his problem and it's his responsibility, and that's the load off my back for this book. The next book I'll carry the load, but this time I just have to make sure he's not lazy. But we do sketch often when we are doing the pages to help when we are trying to pass an idea.
Do we have anything else from the audience? Yeah, please.
So I was wondering, I think the thing that I love the most about Two Brothers and Basically is the story itself and how it's organized. So adapting, like you said, adapting prose over to more of a visual medium, hidden in how you present the story. And I was curious as to if you had any other kind of stories, like novels or graphic novels that influence the way you set up this story.
Yeah,
Okay.
we
Time
need
to
the
repeat
second layer, the second layer of the question, so we can hear what he said.
Okay. That was really long. How would I paraphrase that?
Just essentially like influences that.
influences.
So what other influences on Two Brothers? Is that
So like essentially, I'm curious as to like when they adapted the book into this, if there were other things that influenced them aside from the book itself.
right? So as you were adapting the book, what other work influenced you besides the novel itself?
Okay.
Okay.
One of the things that we've been paying a lot of attention because we were doing this book were other adaptations. Like, for example, Parker by Darwin Cook. How Darwin could make it a great graphic novel, even for people who don't know the novels, who never heard of the character, and it has his style. He tells the story. It's very long and full of panels, and the story is very fluid. Um, and we also looked at other adaptations, like adaptations for TV or for movies, for example. There's a lot of them. And which ones we thought were the good ones and why they were the good ones. And what they did that we could think about and what we could learn from what they did. Like, for example, The Walking Dead, for example. Very good adaptation. They understand the story. They know what to keep from the comics, what to do differently, how to use the media they are working with in favor of the story. What else? For example, like how the Lord of the Rings works so much better than The Hobbit, for example. The Hobbit sucks. The Lord of the Rings is awesome. And so how not to get lost in your media also. And I don't know, this kind of things. Also, you may notice that the way I design the characters and the style is a little simpler, a little more cartoony than what you see on Umbrella Academy or on Casanova, for example, because we wanted, this.
Uh-oh.
Throughout be very iconic and very recognizable. So when you have a style full of details, the characters change more throughout the ages. So we wanted more iconic characters that could tell more emotion with less strokes. And we saw that in manga, for example, in mangas that are very, very simple, or in comics like Scott Pilgrim, for example. Even though one of the things I don't like about Scott Pilgrim is like how so many characters look the same way. Like Scott and the other guy, the boy who loves him, who's his fan. I don't remember his name. They look exactly the same. You can't really tell which one is which depending on the page. And we didn't want that, but they're very iconic. So that's one of the things that makes Scott Pilgrim work so much. And all these cartoons nowadays in TV, they are very iconic. And we wanted a little bit of that on our characters as well. That reflects on the cover, for example. We didn't want a cover that's this big, amazing drawing full of details. We want a cover very simple and striking that you could see from afar, and that it would tell what the story is a little about. I don't know. There's also going in a total different direction. This Italian artist called Sergio Toppi. Do you know Sergio Toppi?
Yes.
Most of you may not know him because he has, I think, nothing published in English. He has also nothing published in Portuguese. We only got to know his work because he came to a convention here in Brazil. They had an exposition of his work. And then when we traveled to France or to Italy, we got all the books that we could get of his work. But he passed away, I think, 1 or 2 years ago. He was this amazing artist of black and white art, full of cross-hatching and master of empty space and composition of pages and layouts and very iconic drawings. And that has influenced my work a lot. And in this book, because it was black and white, I looked a lot on his work, trying to make the composition of the pages as well. And I don't know, there's a lot of influences there already. Everything ends up helping in the things that you are working on. For example, when we started working on this book, Milton, the author, he has 4 other books. I started reading one of the other books, but I stopped and I didn't finish it because the stories were too similar. I didn't want to get confused with the stories, to get one to influence the other. And by like the second year I was working on this book, I couldn't read anything because I could only think about this story. All my brain energy, everything was focused on this story. I couldn't think about anything else. And so I didn't read any other books. I saw very few movies. And if I saw them, I didn't really pay too much attention. Because I was too much focused on this. Because everything you read, everything you see can influence what you're doing. And, well, so that was a little bit of what influenced this book, I think.
Yeah. Cool. Anybody else have anything? Yes.
You mentioned earlier Helene being your favorite character. What drew you the most to him and made him that big character for you?
What drew us to?
What you mentioned that Helene was your favorite character. What drew you to him? What characteristics made him your favorite character?
I think he's the romantic in the story. He's the guy who falls in love with the girl and who spends the entire story. His only concern is how to spend more time with the girl he loves. And I think that's what we relate the most. We saw him as the romantic more than the father, or more than, I don't know, than anything else, the family chief. So, and that made us Halim the favorite character for us. Even if
we suffered. we suffered for him, for all he had to give up to because of his family, all the troubles that Omar gave him, the nights that he couldn't spend with Zana because his son was out or was disappeared or anything. And so we suffered, we related to him, I think. We didn't want that to happen to us. And I think that's why we were driven to Halim the most, I think.
Makes a lot of sense. Are you, I assume the nature of the scope of this project means you're not rushing to do another adaptation anytime soon?
Yeah, well, we don't go looking for adaptations. We did one adaptation before here in Brazil, but it was a short story that we turned into a 60-page book. And after that, we thought we never would do an adaptation again. But then we were invited to do this one, and we couldn't resist all those challenges and that we already mentioned. But so unless somebody brings adaptation to our lab that is impossible to refuse, and we'll try to refuse it, and if we can't refuse it because it's too dreamy, then maybe, but we don't look for them. We don't try. It's not our goal to be the guys who do adaptations because they take so much time. All our books take so much time, and nowadays they take time to do and then they take time to promote. So after the book Two Brothers came out in Brazil in March, and then it came out in France in March. So we went to France to promote it, and then we've been promoting it in Brazil since March, and now we went to New York 2 weeks ago to promote the English version, and next week we go to Italy to promote the Italian version. So all this promotion of the book is incredible, and it's exciting, and it's awesome, but for people who are waiting for the next issue of Casanova, they are very angry with me right now because traveling so much takes us away from the drawing boards. We bought one of those CT companions to see if we can work on the roads, just to try to make up for all that time that we have to be traveling. So we have to choose our projects very carefully because they take so much time, and we don't want to mess with people's patience. They've been very patient with us, and we don't want them to give up on us if we spend 4 or 5 years on another book.
Well, so this segues nicely to what might be a good last question. Oh wait, we have one last one from the internet. So much of your past work from Daniel Elkin. So much of your past work is suffused with magical realism. Did this influence any of your choices in Two Brothers?
I don't know. Two Brothers very down to earth. It's more down to earth than the other stories that we told. We like to get strange elements in the story to hold the attention of the reader, to call for him in a special way. But in Two Brothers, I think the strange element of the story is the fact that the brothers are twins, which we know very well that it's like being the freak in the circus. Everyone looks at you differently. You're not normal. You're two people who look the same. So you're always standing out and in every situation. So I think that's the strange element in this story. But it's much more down to earth than the other stories that we told. But it's a big tragedy, I think. I think it's a new genre that we have ventured in Two Brothers, that we wanted to explore, it's tragedy, because you want things to work out and they don't. You root for everyone to make peace and they don't. And that's just great. It's great to tell a tragic story that people make choices, they have consequences, and you want everything to work out in the end and they don't, and it's great.
Agreed. All right, so as the last question, because we are going a little late here, I just, what do we got coming up next? We finished Casanova, right? And then what do you guys have coming up next? Because we love your work.
Well, aside from Casanova, I'm already working on new Umbrella Academy also. I'm going to tease you with, let's see,
Vai mostrar uma página?
Vou. Wait, let's see how this works. Like this. So these are the layouts I'm doing for the new issue of Umbrella Academy.
And now we know the whole story.
Yeah, now you have the whole story. So this is how we plan our stories, but with this layout, I have a script for it. So I just have to point out what's in each balloon, as opposed to Two Brothers that I actually had to write all the dialogues and text in the layouts. Here, I don't have to. I just point out what's in each balloon, and then they will follow the script. But this is what we do for all the stories. So we first we sketch everything, and then afterwards we draw the actual pages. So we can see the whole story in front of us and see it works. Even if it's in a very sketchy stage, we see it works, and then we can spend 4 years in a story because we know it will work.
You seem well into Umbrella Academy. Do we have? We know when it's going to come out?
Next year.
Yeah,
hopefully I'm still working. I'm still working on the first issue. So, but I think it's next year. I don't know when, but next year for sure. Yeah.
Well, we're all excited to see it, I know. And I absolutely want to thank you guys for taking the time from your day to come and do this with us. We love the book, and we're going to just fossilize it everyone we know. And thank you very much for coming.
Thank you. It was our pleasure.
Yes.
And the audience to our next book club meeting will be December 2nd. It'll be Sandman Overture, and we will have J. H. Williams here in person and a video call. So I hope to see you all there, and I hope to see everybody at home there too. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening and being patient.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
See you again in 4 years.
Yes.